Thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Ensing. Katarina's away. Here's what's making news right now.
My honor to rise on behalf of Premier Ford and our entire government to introduce our 2022 budget.
This is our only beach. We want to make sure that it reflects what the residents expect and that we deliver the results that they expect.
One of the things that people need to know about the avian influenza virus is that please do not feed birds from your hand.
We begin tonight with a dream that many have, to win the lottery. But that dream turned into a nightmare for one local player. The Windsor man says he was cut out of a shared $1 million lottery win, and he wants back in. Last June, a group of 16 won a Max Millions draw. The jilted pool member says he can prove he's the 17th person in that group, and he's gambling on the courts to set things straight. Jacob Barker has that story.
Philip Tsotsos says he feels betrayed.
These guys are like family to me.
When he saw this picture posted to social media late last year, he was taken aback. He says it was his old boss and the organizer of his lottery pool, Stephen Tedesco, holding a check for $1 million Max Millions win. Written on it, group of 16. Tsotsos says he had just brought a pizza to Tedesco and others at an auto delivery company that he'd worked at up until recently.
And that's how I found out. I found out after he's eaten my pizza. I get online and that's what I see. How would you feel?
Tsotsos says that while he had left the job, he remained a part of the lottery pool. In his court filing, Tsotsos alleges he was the 17th member of that group.
I couldn't get my head around why they wouldn't tell me. I mean, how would you feel having your friends and coworkers months after a win not tell you?
Tsotsos is suing the group for $70,000, which includes what he believes is his share of the prize and some other costs. He says he was part of the pool for 7 years, and while he did not often carry a tab, it was always okay to pay later. In his filing to court, Tsotsos lays out text exchanges between him and the organizers of the pool. In June of 2021, the same month the group hit the $1 million win, he joked with Tedesco about the money he owed. "Actually, I won't have to pay you anything. Just take it out of our winnings when we win," Tsotsos wrote. "Okay, but I charge interest, high interest rate. I have kids to feed," Tsotsos says was Tedesco's response. In another conversation with a different organizer for the group, Jesse Reed, Tsotsos says he was told he opted out before the draw. But in a text he says was between him and Reed, it says that he was in. "Okay, just wanted it in writing before the draw," Reed allegedly wrote back.
I don't want anybody else going through this. This has caused me so much stress because these are my best of friends, guys that I care about deeply. Deeply. That did this. And I still can't believe they come out. I can't.
The lawyer representing the group of 16, David Robbins, says Tsotsos didn't pay to play, and the group denies he's entitled to any of the winnings. He has not filed a statement of defense, but plans to do so soon. When asked about the friendship Tsotsos says he has with the pool members, Robbins said, "I'm not at liberty to comment on who Mr. Tsotsos thought was his friend and wasn't his friend, other than to suggest that friends don't go suing friends." There is a form on the OLG website that is used to operate a pool and could help to avoid a situation like this. An OLG spokesperson told me earlier today that it's important to choose a team captain and get good records of who has paid and who hasn't paid, and if somebody can't pay before the draw, just how that will work. Jacob Barker, CBC News, Windsor.
Some solid tips from Jacob at the end there. The Ford government has tabled its long-awaited budget, and it's now all systems go for the election campaign. The budget forms the backbone of what Doug Ford's PCs promise to do if they win the June 2nd election. Mike Crawley reports.
As Doug Ford wraps up his first term as premier, he hopes this budget persuades voters to give him a second.
It's my honor to rise on behalf of Premier Ford and our entire government to introduce our 2022 budget.
In case there's any doubt this is more election platform than budget, the finance minister peppers his speech with words lifted from PC campaign ads.
It's a budget that says yes to rebuilding Ontario's economy.
And repeats the PC party's campaign slogan 10 times.
This is our plan and we will get it done. It's time to get it done. Let's get it done.
Some numbers that catch the eye in this budget. A deficit forecasted almost $20 billion, actually higher than each of the past 2 years. Businesses are raking in profits. Corporate tax revenue is at a record high, jumping 25% in a year. And a sign of the red-hot real estate market, land transfer tax revenue jumped $2 billion in 1 year. Much of what's in the budget is not actually new, already revealed in a string of announcements by the Premier.
Doug Ford's going to go right back to cutting the minute this election is over if we give him the chance.
The PC's promised to spend almost $160 billion on building infrastructure over the next decade.
Clearly, the pandemic, Mike, has exposed some of the lack of investment by, I'm going to be very blunt, by the Liberals, supported by the NDP.
It's actually less than what the Liberals budgeted in their last capital plan.
This budget, this document, is completely lacking in the kind of ambition that I know that the people of Ontario have for our province and want to see for the future of our province.
The two new goodies revealed today: an expanded tax credit for low-income households, and for people aged 70 and up, a new tax credit for medical and home care expenses. What's not in the budget? Nothing to fulfill the promise Ford made last campaign to cut taxes for the middle class, and the phrase climate change gets mentioned once. This budget now means it's full steam ahead for the election campaign. The PCs clearly believe their winning formula is to promise to spend billions on highways, hospitals, and transit. And that's quite a shift for a party that came to power on a promise to rein in government spending. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
And Windsor sees some pre-election promises in this PC budget too. However, all of those investments have already been announced. Our Jason Veal has been going through this budget for us tonight. Jason, what can you tell us?
Well, when you scan through the budget of more than 250 pages, Windsor appears 19 times. By comparison, our region is mentioned more in this budget than places like Ottawa, London, Kitchener-Waterloo, and Brampton. The two biggest items in there for Windsor are the acute care hospital project and investments in the auto sector.
Jason, what's the province saying about those big projects?
Well, for the hospital, they emphasize adding more hospital beds and expanding services when this new mega hospital is built near Windsor's airport. It's currently in stage 2, where they are planning the staff and services they'll need. Construction is expected to start in 4 years, and the budget also says the Ouellette site will remain open for urgent care and ambulatory services. Now, the vast majority, though, of what's in this budget is in relation to Windsor and the automotive sector here. There's a $5 billion joint investment for the LG and Stellantis EV battery manufacturing plant that was previously announced, and that's scheduled to be fully operational by 2025 or in 2025 and create about 2,500 jobs. It also highlights a $1.5 billion commitment from Stellantis to build electric vehicles at the plant here in Windsor.
Jason, these are investments that the Ford government has touted before today's budget. Anything else in there for Windsor-Essex?
There were a few things, Chris. There's mention of a new media arts center moving into the downtown Mission Church building. Renovations are also underway there already. It'll be an accessible space, they say, for residents of all ages from Windsor-Essex, Chatham-Kent, and Sarnia-Lambton in the arts. And that's part of the Investing in Canada infrastructure program. Now, the provincial government also highlighted its previously announced $1 billion plan for developing 5 new transmission lines. Now, these will support the growing electric vehicle and battery manufacturing sectors, as well as the greenhouse industry. Now, that's between Windsor, London, and Sarnia, and that will be done in phases from now through 2030.
Thanks for this, Jason. CBC's Jason Veal live tonight on the budget. Now, with that budget now out and a provincial election looming, disability advocates are calling for increases to Ontario Disability Support Program rates. Those who rely on them say they're not enough. Claire Pasica spoke to a woman from Ajax who's struggling to pay for the basics.
You feel so small, humiliated, and embarrassed.
Alexis Wilson says after she pays her rent for her Ajax home and phone bill, she has $125 left each month for food and everything else she and her service dog Halo might need. With several health conditions leaving her unable to work, the 42-year-old relies on the $1,169 she gets monthly from Ontario's Disability Support Program.
We didn't ask to be born disabled. We became this way because of things that happened in our life or genetic abnormalities in our DNA. And we didn't ask for this. And it's not a nice way to live. Nobody would choose it.
Wilson says she often skips eating for a day and continues to delay much-needed dental work she can't afford. She hasn't bought new clothes in a decade and never gets to go to a movie or restaurant because she doesn't have a penny to spare. Hearing some political parties are thinking of upping the rates has her longing for simple things she's been deprived of for years.
I probably would just buy a book. I haven't been able to buy a book in over a decade. I just don't have the spare money.
Meanwhile, advocates are gathered at Queen's Park today with their own stories of trying to live on ODSP. Many are calling for an increase to $2,000 per month of ODSP, similar to what we saw in pandemic supports like CERB.
Anthony Frizina relies on ODSP payments and helped organize the rally.
If we don't do this now, people with disabilities will be in a deeper hole than we are now. It is time for the government to raise the rates now. Show the people with disabilities in our communities that you care.
The Ontario budget put forward by the current PC government this afternoon didn't do that.
Advocates here say they want to see an increase to ODSP rates firmly on the election agenda. Clara Pasica, CBC News, Toronto.
The City of Ottawa is preparing for another big rolling protest. Hundreds of people on motorcycles are expected to thunder into the capital this weekend. There are fears that it could turn into a repeat of the so-called truckers' protests that happened earlier this year.
The goal of this weekend is to maintain community safety and public safety on our streets as this event unrolls.
The city's already closed several roads. Police will be stepping up enforcement of no parking and no stopping rules, along with bylaws that ban any structures or barbecues in the streets. About 800 RCMP officers have been sworn in as special constables to help bolster the local police presence. Organizers of the motorcycle rally are promoting their event with a march and protest that will be attended by a prominent anti-mask activist. Now, in February, the federal government invoked the Emergencies Act to break up protests that clogged downtown Ottawa for 3 weeks and closed a number of international border points for several days, including here in Windsor. Police are sending officers to Ottawa to help out with the enforcement. They're also preparing for parts of the rolling thunder to pass by Windsor. Mayor Drew Dilkens has a warning for those thinking of participating in the protest.
Well, listen, there's more provincial legislation that has been passed just recently that puts very strict conditions on people who decide to block international border crossings. Police will not sit back. This will not be a passive response any longer. And so I hope that all of the activity is peaceful. I hope that people keep moving, that we don't see a repeat of what we've seen before. But if it does happen, police will respond accordingly and use the new legislative tools that they have to move people along.
Last February, the Ambassador Bridge was blocked for a week by protesters who objected to vaccine mandates. Police received help from the OPP and RCMP to remove the protesters on February 13th after an injunction was obtained. Russian forces have launched a new attack on the Ukrainian capital. There are reports of explosions and at least one person has been killed. The strikes came as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres toured the area and met with President Volodymyr Zelensky.
There is no way a war can be acceptable in the 21st century. Look at that.
Gutierrez visited several cities that were left severely damaged by the Russian invasion. Ukrainian officials say that it was important the Secretary General see the evidence of what they call war crimes. During his meeting with Zelensky, discussions focused on opening a humanitarian corridor to allow trapped civilians to leave the besieged steel mill in Mariupol. The UN says Gutierrez and Russian President Vladimir Putin reached an agreement in principle on safe passage for civilians. Health Canada has ended a policy that restricted gay men from donating blood for 3 months after being sexually active. The move took years to implement. The Prime Minister commented this afternoon.
So over the past years, we funded over $5 million, a dozen different studies to make sure that we could get to this day. It is frustrating that it took this long. Implementation should be done by the fall, hopefully. But this is good news for all Canadians. Our blood supply will continue to be safe, and we're doing away with a discriminatory blanket ban.
Change means a new screening questionnaire will be in place by the end of September that will ask about recent sexual activity, not sexual orientation. Answers to the questionnaire will determine whether a waiting period for blood donation is needed. Job hunters applying for a position can benefit from knowing how much people doing the job at a company are getting paid and what the prospects are for eventual raises. Several cities in the U.S. are looking at that idea, and some people say providing that information should be mandatory for employers here in Canada. The CBC's Leanne Young reports.
Michelle Hamoui has regrets about her first job in Canada. The IT project manager from Lebanon accepted a lowball job offer without knowing it.
By the time you get the offer, it's like, I invested so much time. I'll go in and then afterwards I'll show them how good I am and then they'll look at it, but that rarely happens.
She says knowing the salary range before she applied would have given her more bargaining power.
I probably would not have applied, or if I applied, asked for more.
Hamoui is among a growing number of Canadians demanding pay transparency laws, much like Colorado, or starting next month in New York City, where all job postings will require listed pay scales.
That has been shown to close the gender and racial wage gap in the sense that people don't ask for a salary that's lower than the wage band and they know what the maximum could be.
In Canada, other than public sector and unionized jobs, most salary information remains a secret. Ontario passed pay transparency laws in 2018, but the next progressive Conservative government delayed its implementation indefinitely. BC is now considering legislation.
What was the response like when you guys first implemented pay transparency?
This Vancouver software company decided to start posting its wages last year. They say it's paid off.
By creating a trusting relationship between our employees and the business, and we've seen a huge uptick in the number of candidates that have applied.
Many of their applicants are younger and like the clarity around salaries. They're part of a growing movement online.
My first salary was $42K. My second executive assistant job was for a way bigger company. I was making $58.
For Hamoui, she hopes it won't be left up to individuals to share salaries.
There is zero reason for that not to be disclosed. The same way it's working in the public sector, there's no reason it shouldn't work for the private sector.
Openness that could help level the playing field. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
The City of Windsor has come up with a preliminary plan for the redesign of Sandpoint Beach. The impetus behind the redesign is to make the beach safer.
At the meetings and online, residents can look forward to learning more about the proposed beach location, the fishing point, the splash pad, as well as upgrades to the kayak launch, the playground, and much more.
The new beach will be located where Stop 26 Park and Ganacho Park are now, where the current is weaker. The current beach will be converted into parkland. It will be called Sandpoint Beach Park. The cost estimated at $5 million, but the city hopes to access grants from the province and federal government. The public will be able to comment on the proposed redevelopment at 2 consultation sessions. Those are going to take place Thursday, May 19th. Concerns over avian flu has Ojibwe Park taking precautions. It means a temporary halt to a popular activity of hand-feeding birds.
Some of the precautions that we're taking for avian influenza is taking down our bird feeders. So we will not be feeding the birds this spring, unfortunately. But with that said, you know, the birds do have lots of food available to them. So we really put out seed for our own pleasure so we can see the birds up close, but they don't really need the bird seeds. They have lots of food sources for them available here, and especially in the springtime, there's a bountiful amount of food for the birds. One of the things that people need to know about the avian influenza virus is that please do not feed birds from your hand. That is one thing that we are discouraging people to do now at Ojibwe Park is to not feed the birds from their hand. And with our visitors that are coming here, frequently feeding the birds out of their hand, they will, you know, they're coming up to people looking for those handouts now. So that's not necessarily a good thing because they're losing their natural, you know, instinct to be able to find food.
And I guess another piece of that is we're looking for birds not to congregate in the same area.
And that's the other idea too, is that we don't want a lot of birds congregating in the same area. And with bird feeders, that does happen. You're pulling birds in from everywhere, and you know that could transmit the virus. So with taking the feeders down, that's, you know, one way that we can at least do our part.
How do we know if a bird that we're observing has the avian flu? What are some of the signs?
So one of the things that I would look for if you suspect the bird may have avian flu is that you're looking for abnormal behavior. And what I mean by that is if you were to approach a bird and it doesn't fly away, that's abnormal behavior. If it is tilting its head to the side, if it's shaking, if it has tremors, something like that, that would definitely be a cause for alarm. If you still choose to feed the birds, one thing that we would recommend you doing in your backyard is to make sure that you are diligent about keeping your feeders as clean as possible. So, taking them down every week or two and giving them a soak if you do continue to feed.
That's a beautiful shots that you can see from Mike Evans doing the reporting there as well of birds that we are not to feed by hand. Some spectacular weather to watch them, though, I think, this evening. Nick is going to join us with a look at the forecast next. Nick joins us now for a live look at the weather. It is sunny out there right now, man.
It's sunny. A little cool, though, I think. 10 degrees. But you know what? We'll take it, right? I mean, it's better than the weather we'd seen recently. We did hit double digits in Windsor, just barely. 10 degrees right now. Now, mind you, the seasonal temperature for this time of year, 17. We're off of that mark. But nonetheless, it did come with sunshine. We've got frost advisories in effect once more for tonight as temperatures dip down to or below the 0 mark. Comes under clear skies across all of southern Ontario, and this is really high pressure that's kind of sandwiched between a couple storms. So this was our last weather maker. That pushed off a couple days ago. This is the next one that's going to move in sort of Saturday, kind of mid to late day as that high pressure begins to weaken. But in the meanwhile, we're looking at clear skies, cool overnights though, and that's just partly because of the clear skies. A lot of that heat sort of radiates away. So speaking of the overnight period, we're looking at clear skies, and then as we move through tomorrow, sunshine. Sunshine for the most part taking us through till Saturday. Saturday, you start to see this system starting to edge in. So a little bit of cloud cover kind of poking in. Might even see a brief shower, and then I think through the midday we'll actually get some sunny breaks in there. So not straight cloud cover, but still generally cloudy skies for Saturday. Winds, they're calming down. We've had a few days of sort of gusty winds. They're going to sort of peter out and then pick up again as we head through Saturday as that system begins to approach once more. Gusts again up to about 40 kilometers per hour. Southwestern Ontario for tonight, temperatures, they're on the cool side, -2 for Windsor, down to -4 in the London area. And that, again, why we have those frost advisories in effect. Long-range forecast starts to creep up in the temperatures back up to the seasonal mark. So a pair of 14s here as we move through Saturday. Sunday, look for a few showers, 17 degrees. Monday, a break there again, and then more in the way of rainfall for Tuesday.
Those lows, though, they're getting pretty high.
Well, they're getting better, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to see any more of that. We're almost in May.
No, but the rest of that stuff is good. Thanks for this, Nick.
Yeah, you bet.
Coming up, we have a story about positive politics. That's next. Now, a key part of any state visit is the welcoming party. That detail was not missing in Greece today when the leader of Finland came to call. The Greek Prime Minister's dog was on hand. It is clear in this video that Peanut is a master of soft diplomacy, handles a photo op with poise, with grace. A heartwarming side to this story, too. Peanut was adopted into the Prime Ministerial home last year from an animal shelter. That's it for us here at CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, go to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. Thanks for watching. Have a great evening.